I'm Nick Williams of DeepBridge Consulting, and welcome to another episode of Whiteboard Wednesday. Today, we're going to be talking about your consumer and the key to qualitative research. It has everything to do about jumping in that Wayback Machine. Stick around, I promise it'll make more sense. Welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesday. So, today we're going to be talking about your customer and why they're not buying. And it all starts with the upfront research. And the reason I want to do this is because oftentimes when you look up market research, qualitative research, or how to make a value proposition or better set up your product launch, or if you want to make your product a little bit better or your services a little bit better and increase why people are buying. If you actually get on Google and type that in, there will be a lot of things that talk theoretically or educationally, but nothing that talks about actionability. So I want to just go through no BS, and I want you to try these things, these steps, and see if they work. And it's going to be based around one core concept, and that is take me back to when X. So take me back to when you made this choice. Take me back to when you bought this widget. Take me back to when you started to realize I need this service. So hopping in that Wayback Machine, get in that, take the consumer there, and that is going to be the key to unlocking all this. So let's get into it. So if you are trying to understand what it is about your service that makes it attractive to the consumer, and you're having a conversation with them, well, that is the best way to enhance something, to pivot to something better, or to launch something correctly. When you hop in that Wayback Machine with the consumer and you take them back to when they made this crucial decision, this is this critical point in research, and it is the moment at which you have a make or break opportunity to deliver a product or service that matters to your customer segment. So taking them back to when they needed that product, when they needed that service, is absolutely crucial in understanding what it is you're doing right or wrong. It is in that moment you get the most pure versions of insight, and it is the very thing that makes insight the essence of growth. It is in that moment you get the most pure versions of insight, and it is the very thing that makes insight the essence of growth, and even actionable insight. Intelligence without action is not necessarily something that you can base a business behind. There has to be objective, there has to be intentionality, and you need to make sure that when you're taking the consumer back in this Wayback Machine and you're saying, look, tell me about the time you made that choice. When you take them there, make sure you're guiding their decisions, because you'll notice when you start talking to a consumer about why they made a choice, they'll skim over things that make them uncomfortable or if they can't necessarily remember. So your goal when you take this in this Wayback Machine, and then we'll get into the 5 pillars that you need to be delivering on when you take them back. But the key thing to remember is consumers don't like when there's any sort of confusion. They don't like the uncomfortable feeling of not being able to explain themselves. So naturally we have a tendency to just breeze past things that we don't really think about at a conscious level. And as a professional market researcher, I can tell you this happens consistently. And the big failure some people make is they'll even take the consumer back in the Wayback Machine and say, look, why actually did you feel the need to buy this? When they do that, the consumer will likely not remember, or it'll just be uncomfortable. Just that awkward silence. They already feel like they're being cross-examined by someone on the other side doing qualitative research. The worst thing in the world is not to know an answer and look silly. So they'll go, I don't remember, it was a long time ago, and then they'll start telling you other things. Always bring them back to that buying decision, that buying moment, and then keep them there. And when you get them there, hit these 5 principles. So we're going to start with number 1. Find the trigger. So making sure you're finding this trigger and understanding at a deep level what it is about your product or service that delivers some need for that consumer. Did they make your decision? Did they consider your services based out of frustration? Based out of the simple fact that this fix doesn't exist in the marketplace anywhere? Or did they make this choice to buy your product or your service because it was convenient? Was it because it was cost effective? These triggers matter a great deal, because if someone tells you, I actually was considering buying this because there was, no one else out there that could really do what I needed them to do. So I went on a year-long hunt to actually find out that your product does this. If someone tells you that, you just got a lot of information. You're not doing a very good job of marketing, number one. You need to be producing more educational content, number two. You need to be targeting your ideal audience a little bit better, number three. And it goes on and on and on. Now, if someone tells you, I actually decided to use your product because your competitor, who's a little bit more well-known, admittedly, is just bad at X. They're really good at Y, which may be the core tenet of the value proposition of your segment. They're bad at X, and X could be, they're really good software, but they have horrible customer service. The times that I do experience bugs, it makes me want to pull my hair out, okay? That's very important information to know. While that may be a secondary value proposition to the consumer, software being the first, you know that customer service is very crucial. That funnels perfectly into step 2, which is identify what success is to that ideal consumer. If you can identify what success is, you're obviously going to be able to set your product, service, and your messaging up to deliver on that. The next phase of this is going to be to discover your perceived barriers. So perceived barriers are so important to messaging and conversion because it helps you identify what are the areas in which your consumer base might not be making a purchase. And if you did step 1 correctly, and if you did the trigger part of this, the trigger pillar correctly, you already have a really good understanding of what helps someone not to buy your product or make someone leave the competition or even leave you. That is going to be a perceived barrier. What pillar 3 is all about, though, and where it makes it a little bit different from finding the trigger, is you can find the trigger, but you need to really be able to quantify what the perceived barrier actually is. And it's very important that I'm focusing on the word perceived here, because very often the consumer, it may not actually be a barrier. The consumer could be not making this up, but they could be internalizing something, they could be projecting something, they could be misunderstanding something. So if a consumer comes to you and say, look, it's too expensive, that is a perceived barrier. Because if someone says something if the consumer comes to you and says it's too expensive, that is 100% a perceived barrier. Something being expensive isn't. If the consumer comes to you and says something is too expensive, that is certainly a perceived barrier, and it is perceived. Their ability to internalize and understand the benefits of your product is directly related to what they think value and what they value your product at. So it's more often than not, you're not doing a great job of explaining the value of your product. So expensive is more a value problem. And it's something that can be controlled and adjusted, which is the good news. So really hone in on what is the perceived barrier. Once you've understood what the barrier is and you've quantified that perceived barrier and how large it is, you can really get a good sense of what this gap and understanding that your consumer needs filled. If someone is talking about, I don't understand your product, that's an educational problem. If you have something that's a little bit more sophisticated and technical, that's going to drive your messaging delivery, how you set up all of your content. That's going to do a lot of things for you and help you understand what you need to be saying and the messaging you need to be including in your product or service. So discovering this perceived barrier is very important because it does a really good job of making sure you're delivering on what your customer is saying is the trigger, and then the success they identified, the job to be done that your product needs to deliver on. Step 3 is just understand what stops them from doing it, how big it is, and what you really need to be focusing on. Step 4 is going to be about mapping out the buyer's journey. Now, the buyer's journey is the piece of this that is the cohesion. So steps 1 through 3 are all the tactical responses and the implementations you can pursue. Step 4 is going to be the roadmap in which you plot them. So if you have destinations on a map but don't actually have the routes between them, it's worthless, right? And vice versa. You could have the routes with no destination or pit stops, it's a worthless map to you. Bringing those 4 together, 1 through 3 with the addition of the cohesion in step 4, this is what really is going to set you up for ultimate success in your qualitative research and making it actionable. And what I mean by that is there are going to be very specific instances in which your customer base is going to be open to different messaging. So as long as you did a really good job of steps 1 through 3, coupled with you having an ideal client and clear stipulations around who they are, well, your buyer's journey just gets really simple. And at DeepBridge, we use a lot of software, and we also use a combination of qualitative and quantitative research to understand where the instances in which you can deliver a powerful, positive message to your consumer best convey value so you can increase conversion. So if your ideal consumer undergoes an extensive research process, if it takes them 6 months to decide if they want to buy your product, you're going to have a lot of digital touch points. Technology makes it so that we are able to really impact our consumer in very specific moments. So if they're on Google searching something in, you have the opportunity to say something to them. Now that gets even deeper, advanced tactical strategies like SEO, keyword research, making sure what are they typing in is, you could be a long tail keyword. All of these things are deeper parts of this execution, but for now, all you need to know is if the journey requires research, you know that Google's a great place. If it's about sharing in social, well, you got your answer there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, these are all good places in which you can actually target parts of the buyer's journey to take some action and have them engage with you at some level. So the buyer's journey is crucial because it allows you to deliver this specific target to some micro audience to enhance their likelihood and their propensity to buy. Now, wrapping it all up is once you have 1 through 4, step 5 about establishing decision criteria actually looks a lot like identifying success. So if you did 1 through 4 correctly, establishing the decision criteria is going to be the make or break way that you can create an undeniably good experience. While Pillar 2 is about identifying what the success is, what a job to be done is, Pillar 5, what the decision criteria is, Pillar 5 is all about setting up the roadmap in order to maximize steps 1 through 4. So if the decision criteria means I need something that is convenient, fast, and never fails. Those 3 things are very different than I need something that exudes premium quality. I need something that needs to stand 30 feet underwater. I need some technical software that streamlines my entire process. Whatever they're saying, this is what needs to happen in my business, and here's how I'm deciding. They're basically giving you the blueprint to selling them, to converting them. So you need to make sure that you're getting what it is the decision criteria is, linking that up with what is success and a job to be done, what does that look like? And then bringing all these together to create an experience that is absolutely worthy of their obsession. When you do all of these 5 things and you do these 5 pillars and you start with, take me back to a time, and you hone in on that specific moment and you get those deep insights, you're creating a customer first approach that is undeniable. So these 5 key pillars are absolutely critical, coupled with take me back to a time, making sure they're going back to that buying instance, specific buying instance. Now, you don't have to be a trained qualitative market researcher to do this. Just have the conversation and focus on when they made the choice. Do not let them wiggle out. If you have any questions that come from this, if you need any points that are unique to your business that you want to see added to this and how or when or if they're even applicable, I'm happy to answer it. Just reach out to Nick Williams at DeepBridgeConsulting.com. There will be a link below. And we look forward to hearing from you, and we will see you next Wednesday at Whiteboard Wednesday.